How China's electrical grid is being rebuilt for AI the West can't compete. Walk outside tonight and find a power outlet. That single socket connects you to a grid that has barely changed since the Clinton administration. Now, picture a country that built 7 entirely new versions of that grid on top of the one it already had in 25 years. 7 times. You heard that right. And the craziest part is not how much power China built it, is what that power is about to run. If that sounds like something that rewrites the global order, hit a quick like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why electricity is destiny and why destiny does not wait. The equation nobody taught you. Here is something no energy textbook will tell you directly. The country that wins the electricity race does not just win the energy race. It wins the manufacturing race, the AI race, the economic race, and ultimately the geopolitical race of the entire century. Electricity is not infrastructure, it is destiny. And one country understood that equation 30 years ago, while everyone else was looking the other way. Cast your mind back to the 1990s. China's economy was growing fast, but its grid was a patchwork. Blackouts were common. Industrial zones ran on diesel generators because the national supply simply could not keep up. Engineers and planners inside Beijing's energy ministries looked at that fragility and made a decision that would take decades to fully understand. They did not just decide to fix the grid. They decided to make the grid the foundation of everything that came after. Not a utility, a weapon. Think of it like the foundation of a house. Most countries built their economies on the ground floor and assumed the foundation would hold. China went down first. It poured concrete for 20 years before the rest of the world noticed the building going up. Now here is what that decision actually produced. China's total power generation in the year 2000 sat at roughly 1.4 trillion kilowatt hours annually. Today that number is over 9 trillion kilowatt hours. That is nearly a 7-fold increase in a single generation. To put that in terms, you can feel the United States currently generates about 4.4 trillion kilowatt hours per year. China did not just surpass America, it lapped it, and then kept running. Here is the part that most people never stop to think about. The United States grid has been essentially flat for 30 years, not declining flat. America got more efficient, which masked the stagnation, but the actual output, the raw generating capacity added to the system, barely moved from the Clinton era to today. While China was commissioning new power stations faster than most countries could permit a single one, America was congratulating itself on using less electricity per household. Efficiency is not the same as capacity, and capacity is what the future runs on. What made China's approach genuinely different was not just the scale, it was the intentionality. Every dam, every reactor, every solar farm, every transmission line was part of a coordinated national strategy that treated energy security the way a military planner treats supply lines, as the thing everything else depends on. Cut the supply line, and the whole operation collapses. Secure it, and you can project power indefinitely. America's grid is a legacy system built for the 20th century economy. China's grid is a platform built for the 21st. And the gap between a legacy system and a platform is not a gap you close with a policy announcement. But to understand just how deep that platform goes, you need to start at the bottom. And the bottom is water, the dam that slowed the earth. Picture the largest concrete structure your mind can hold. Now make it bigger. The Three Gorges Dam stretches more than 1.25 miles across the Yangtze River in Hubei province, a wall of concrete 185 feet taller than the Eiffel Tower from base to summit. It took nearly 2 decades to build, displaced over 1 million people, and when its reservoir filled, it redistributed 42 cubic miles of water mass across the planet's surface. Physicists calculated that the shift was large enough to measurably slow the Earth's rotation. You heard that right. A single piece of infrastructure altered the spin of the planet. And then it got to work. Three Gorges produces 22,500 megawatts of continuous generating capacity. That is roughly equivalent to running 22 large conventional power stations simultaneously, all from a single structure on a single river. On its best generating days, it produces more electricity than some mid-sized countries consume in a week. Here is the detail that puts everything into perspective. When Three Gorges was completed in 2012, most Western energy analysts treated it as a one-off vanity project, a record for the record books. What they missed was that China was already building the next one. The Baihetan Dam sits on the Jinsha River in southwest China and came fully online in recent years as the second-largest hydropower station ever constructed on Earth. It generates 16,000 megawatts from 16 turbine units. Each one of those individual turbine units is larger than any single generator ever built by any Western country. Think about that. Not the whole dam. Each individual spinning machine inside it dwarfs the best single generator the West ever produced. But Baihetan is not just a power station. It is connected to a dedicated ultra-high voltage direct current transmission line that stretches over 1,200 miles to deliver power directly into Shanghai's industrial corridor. 1,200 miles. That is a greater distance than from New York City to Miami. Power generated deep in the mountains of Yunnan province arrives in one of the world's most electricity-hungry cities with almost no loss along the way. Now here is what makes this even harder to process. Both Three Gorges and Baihetan, two of the largest power stations in human history, are about to be overshadowed by a single project currently under construction in Tibet. The Motuo hydropower complex is being built inside the Yarlung Tsangpo Canyon, the deepest river canyon on Earth. When complete, it is projected to generate 60,000 megawatts. 60,000. That single project, on a single river in a single canyon, would produce more hydroelectric power than the entire installed hydro capacity of the United States, Canada, and Germany combined. China did not build the world's biggest dam. It built the world's biggest dam, then built the second biggest, and is now building something that makes both of them look like opening acts. And hydropower is only the first layer of what China has constructed. The next layer is the one that genuinely terrifies Western energy planners: the nuclear factory. Here is something that should stop you cold. The United States invented civilian nuclear power. American engineers designed the first commercial reactors. American companies built the first nuclear plants that put electrons on a grid. America had a 30-year head start and the deepest pool of nuclear engineering expertise on the planet. And today, China is building more nuclear reactors simultaneously than the rest of the world combined. Every single country. Added together, China is doing more. Right now, China has 58 operational reactors. But the number that really matters is what comes next. 94 gigawatts of nuclear capacity, either already running or under active construction inside Chinese borders alone. 94 gigawatts. For context, the entire United States nuclear fleet, every reactor still operating in America today, produces around 95 gigawatts. China is about to match the entire American nuclear arsenal in new construction alone, on top of what it already has running. Think of nuclear construction like a production line at a car factory. The West treats each reactor like a custom hand-built vehicle. Years of bespoke engineering, unique site modifications, one-off regulatory battles. China treats reactors the way Toyota treats the Camry. Standardized design, repeatable process, cost and time driven down with every successive unit. That standardized design is called the Hualong 1. It is a domestically developed third-generation pressurized water reactor, and China is not just deploying it at home, it is exporting it. Pakistan has Hualong 1 units operating. Argentina has a contract for one. And here is where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable for Western governments. China's state nuclear company secured involvement in the construction of Hinkley Point C in the United Kingdom, Britain's most critical new energy infrastructure project. Chinese engineering and Chinese capital became embedded in the heart of Britain's power future. The British government eventually moved to limit further Chinese involvement in its nuclear sector, but by then the dependency had already been written into concrete and steel. You cannot unembed a reactor design once the foundation is poured. Now here is what most people get wrong when they compare East and West on nuclear. They point to safety concerns, regulatory differences, democratic oversight. All of that is real. But here is the brutal catch. While the debate was happening, the gap was widening. The United States attempted to build 2 new reactors at the Vogtle plant in Georgia. Just 2. They arrived 7 years late and $17 billion over the original budget. The cost per megawatt of installed capacity at Vogtle was higher than any power project in American history. 2 reactors. 7 years late, $17 billion over budget. China permitted, built, and brought online more capacity than that while the concrete at Vogtle was still being poured. America did not lose the nuclear race because it lacked the knowledge. It lost it because it stopped practicing. And an industry that stops practicing does not stay sharp. It fossilizes. But nuclear, as extraordinary as China's program is, still represents a fraction of the total grid story. The next chapter is where the numbers stop making sense entirely. The solar and wind avalanche. Take everything you think you know about the global renewable energy transition. The ambitious targets, the record-breaking years, the headlines about solar becoming the cheapest electricity source in history. Hold all of that in your head. Now understand that China is doing all of it simultaneously, at a scale that makes every Western renewable program look like a weekend project. Here is a single number that reframes the entire conversation. In the year 2023 alone, China installed more new solar generating capacity than the United States has installed across its entire history of solar deployment. Every panel, every rooftop array, every utility-scale farm America has ever built, China matched and surpassed that total in a single calendar year. You heard that right. And that is not the part that should unsettle you most. Picture a cargo ship. Now picture a fleet of them, hundreds, moving in a continuous convoy. China's offshore wind expansion in the South China Sea operates on roughly that rhythm. Every single quarter, China adds new offshore wind capacity equivalent to the entire installed wind fleet of the United Kingdom. Not every year, every quarter. Britain spent 2 decades building its offshore wind industry and considers it a point of national pride. China replicates it 4 times a year. What makes this possible is not just money or political will, though both are present in enormous quantities. It is the fact that China built its manufacturing base for renewable components at the same time it built the demand for them. Solar panels, wind turbines, the inverters and transformers that connect them to the grid, China manufactures the overwhelming majority of all of these globally. It is not buying the renewable transition from someone else. It is selling it to everyone else while simultaneously installing it faster than anyone else. Now here is the part that engineers outside China spent years refusing to believe. Moving all that generated power from where it is produced, remote deserts in Xinjiang, mountain ranges in Sichuan, offshore platforms in the South China Sea, to where it is consumed, the manufacturing megacities of the eastern seaboard requires transmission infrastructure of a kind that Western grid engineers once considered theoretically marginal at best. China's ultra-high voltage direct current transmission lines carry electricity across distances of over 1,000 miles with line losses so low they were described as physically implausible by Western grid researchers as recently as 15 years ago. The technology existed in theory. China built it in practice, at scale, across some of the most geographically hostile terrain on Earth. Here is what makes this incredibly exciting and strategically alarming depending on where you are standing. China does not treat solar, wind, nuclear, and hydro as competing policy choices. There is no renewable versus nuclear debate happening in Beijing's energy ministries. All 4 are deployed simultaneously as components of a single unified grid expansion strategy. The goal is not to pick a winner. The goal is total electrical dominance, and the grid being built right now is not designed to meet current demand. It is designed for a demand that does not fully exist yet. That demand has a name, and understanding it changes everything about why this grid was built the way it was. The transmission weapon. Most people, when they think about electricity, think about the moment it gets made. The dam, the reactor, the solar panel catching light. That is the glamorous part, the generation. But here is the part nobody talks about. Getting that electricity from where it is born to where it is needed is an entirely different engineering problem. And for most of the world, it is the problem that quietly defeats everything else. Think of a garden hose. Turn the tap on full and water rushes in one end, but the longer the hose, the more pressure you lose by the time it reaches the other end. Electricity transmission works on a similar principle. Every mile of wire bleeds a fraction of the power it is carrying. Over long distances, those fractions become percentages. Those percentages become gigawatts. And gigawatts wasted in transmission are gigawatts you have to generate twice. For decades, this physics problem set a hard ceiling on how far you could practically move power. The solution, ultra-high voltage direct current transmission, or UHVDC, existed in theory for years. Western grid operators studied it, modeled it, wrote papers about it. China built it. China currently operates more ultra-high voltage transmission lines than the rest of the world combined. Its longest lines stretch over 2,000 miles, a distance greater than from Los Angeles to Chicago, carrying power from hydroelectric stations in the remote southwest and wind farms in the Gobi Desert directly into the pond. Industrial heart of the eastern seaboard. Line losses on these systems run below 1% per thousand miles. Western engineers spent years insisting that figure was not practically achievable outside a laboratory. China achieved it across mountain ranges, river crossings, and earthquake zones. Here is the detail that puts everything into perspective. The Baihetan to Jiangsu transmission line alone carries 8,000 megawatts of capacity over more than 1,200 miles. 8,000 megawatts delivered across a distance that would stretch from one end of Western Europe to the other. That single line carries more continuous power over more distance than anything the United States has ever built or currently operates anywhere on its grid. And China is not maintaining this network. It is expanding it. New UHVDC corridors are being commissioned to serve the next generation of generation projects, including the Motuo hydropower complex in Tibet, which will require transmission infrastructure of a scale not yet built anywhere on Earth. If the fact that China has already lapped the West on transmission surprised you, the next part is going to be even harder to believe. Hit subscribe so you are there when we cover it. The grid China has built is extraordinary. But the reason it was built this way, the specific future it was engineered to power, is the part that changes everything. The grid, built for 2040. Here is a question that the world's most powerful technology companies are quietly terrified of answering out loud. Where do you build a data center when the thing your entire business depends on is electricity, cheap, abundant, uninterruptible electricity, and the country with the most of it is not the country you assumed would win? Every serious AI system running today is, at its core, a power consumption problem. A single large AI training cluster can consume as much electricity as a small city. One cluster. The data centers being built right now to run the next generation of AI models are not measured in square footage. They are measured in megawatts. And the projections for what the AI economy will demand in electricity by the year 2040 are numbers that make current grid planners in the United States and Europe go very quiet, very fast. Now here is what most people get wrong about this moment. They assume the AI race is about algorithms and chips and the brilliance of researchers. Those things matter. But underneath all of it, underneath every large language model, every autonomous system, every AI-powered manufacturing line is a power socket. And the country that controls the power socket controls the pace of the race. China understood this before the race had a name. The grid being built today, the Motuo Dam, the UHVDC corridors, the nuclear factories, the solar avalanche was not designed for China's economy as it exists right now. It was designed for the economy that arrives when AI moves from research tool to operational infrastructure. When every factory runs on continuous machine intelligence, when every logistics network is autonomous, when national defense, agriculture, medicine, and finance all run on uninterruptible computational power, that economy needs electricity the way a human body needs oxygen, constant, abundant, non-negotiable. Here is what makes this incredibly exciting and sobering in equal measure. China is not preparing for that economy. It is pre-building the physical foundation of it right now, years before the full demand arrives. That is the strategic move. You do not build a grid for the load you have today. You build it for the load you intend to carry tomorrow, and by the time tomorrow arrives, it is too late to start pouring concrete. The United States is currently debating how to permit new transmission lines. Europe is navigating competing national grid interests across dozens of sovereign borders. China is commissioning the largest power projects in human history on a unified national timeline with a single strategic objective. The factories that build the chips, the data centers that run the models, and the industrial systems that manufacture the physical world of the next century all need a home. And home is wherever the power is. What that means for the West and for the world is the verdict this entire story has been building toward. Energy is destiny, and destiny doesn't wait. Here is the verdict that makes every Western infrastructure analyst and every AI company executive sit up straight when it lands. The United States and Europe are not behind China in the energy race because they lack the money. They are not behind because they lack the engineers. They are not behind because the technology was unavailable to them. They are behind because they stopped building. For 20 years, they stopped. And China never did. That gap is not a projection anymore. It is not a think tank warning or a geopolitical forecast. It is concrete, literally. It is steel and copper and transformer coils buried under mountains, strung across deserts, and submerged under rivers. It is the Motuo Canyon in Tibet, where 60,000 megawatts of generating capacity is being carved out of the deepest gorge on Earth. 60,000 megawatts from a single site. That is more than the entire electrical output of the United Kingdom on any given day from one canyon on one river in one province. Now here is what most people get wrong when they hear all of this. They reach for a technological solution. They assume that somewhere in a Silicon Valley lab or a Brussels policy document, there is a leapfrog move, a better battery, a smarter grid algorithm, a fusion breakthrough that lets the West skip the decades of construction and arrive at the same destination faster. That instinct is deeply human, and it is wrong. Think of a garden that has been growing for 30 years versus a patch of dirt where someone just decided to plant seeds. You cannot algorithm your way to a 30-year-old tree. You cannot subsidize it into existence by next quarter. The grid is not software. It does not update overnight. It is infrastructure in the oldest, heaviest, most unforgiving sense of the word, and China has more of it, newer of it, and is adding to it faster than the rest of the world combined. Here is the brutal catch that every conversation about AI dominance eventually arrives at. The models, the chips, the data centers, the autonomous factories, none of it runs on ambition. It runs on electrons. And the country that has already built 7 times its year 2000 grid capacity, that is commissioning the largest hydropower projects, the most nuclear reactors, the most solar installations, and the longest transmission lines simultaneously, is not positioning itself to power the AI economy. It is already powering it. At a scale the West cannot match without 30 years of continuous construction it has not yet started. Energy is destiny. China read that equation in the 1990s and never stopped executing against it. The rest of the world is only now beginning to understand what was actually being built and what it was being built for. If this changed how you think about who actually wins the AI race, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the West can still close this gap with a serious decade of construction and political will? Or has China already built a lead so large that the factories, the data centers, and the AI economy of the next century are going to run on Chinese electrons no matter what happens next?